Let's move on to the heart because it's going to get harder from here. This one does not have any guidance for you as to where the points go and how far the handle should be dragged. Somebody once taught me that if you kind of divide your shape into symmetrical parts, when you drag out the handle, if you drag about 1/3 of the curve that you want to make, you should get pretty much the curve that you want. Now that's a little bit hard to follow. So let me drag down some guides. I'm going to turn my rulers on. So let's imagine I had a pair of scissors and I wanted to cut this heart into equal symmetrical shapes. Well, the easiest is right down the middle. So I'm going to drag a guideline right down the middle. If I folded this heart in half, I could make a Valentine by simply folding a piece of paper in half and cutting half of it, opening it up, and I get a reflection of that first half. That's easy. How about each, we'll call them, if we get anatomical, lobes of the heart? What if we wanted to draw this shape? I'm going to switch to my line tool for just a second. And I'm going to click, hold, and drag out with it because this shape up here is pretty much symmetrical. I could fold that in half. And that's what I really want to start thinking about. If I drew another guide out to where that would be in half, now of course the guide goes up and down, but this would be about, if I were drawing a diagonal, where I would want to draw it in half. So I'm going to use my line tool again. I'm just going to type my D key because I want to give that a black stroke, just so I can see it a little better. Let me go back to my swatches panel. And I'm just going to change my fill to none. And I'm going to switch to my selection tool, get that first line that I drew, give that a black stroke, remove its fill. So if I'm drawing this into divisions, that's pretty much reflective. I get a sense of where I would click. I'd click here, and I'd click here. And then when I get down to here, I may add a point in the middle. I may not have to. I'm going to drag a guide out there just in case anyway. So I've basically isolated two curves for this heart. Okay, now this is probably starting to get a little confusing. This is why I said don't try to do this with me the first time if you've never done it. Just watch me. Let me just click off to deselect that guideline. I'm going to fit this to my window, and before I do anything, I'm going to use my selection tool, and I'm just going to lock these two rules. You don't even really need to have these lines. This is just a visual indicator. So with these two lines selected, I'm going to go to my object menu and I'm going to lock them, lock the selection. This is just going to avoid the pen tool activating either one of those lines that I drew and bring them into the selection. I don't want them to do that. So I'm going to zoom in really tightly on this bottom curve. I'm going to start at the bottom point, switch to my pen tool, single click. Here's the guide that I dragged down to show me where the middle of this curve is. So if I click, hold, and drag, I'm going to drag out the first half of that curve. I'm going to go to my swatches panel and just change the stroke from black to cyan because I think it's going to be a little bit easier to see. And I'll often do that when I'm tracing something or when I'm drawing something. If it's on a background that makes the path hard to see, I'll just change the color of the path. And I'm just going to close this. And I'm going to continue drawing. The next point I want to place is to create the second half of that curve. And I'm just going to focus on that left side right now. As I draw the shape with the antenna, I want to draw it so it sits on that curve. And I'm going to continue drawing. I actually think I want to be maybe about here. That's actually truly more symmetrical. And click, hold, and drag. Now here's where that third comes in. If I drag out to visually, where I see is about 1/3 of that curve. When I release my mouse and continue drawing the next part, I draw again out about 1/3. That's pretty close. I have to go back and make some adjustments, but that's natural. That handle down here, I'm not going to select it just yet. That I don't think I dragged out far enough. Here's where it gets tricky because I want to continue drawing the second half of this heart. The first half is pretty good. What happens here is I need to change the direction of the curve. Well, if I hold down my Command key or my Control key, I can toggle to my selection tool and I can click on the handle to move it. But of course, it's going to move the curve on the other side of the point. So how do I get around that? If I hold down the Option key on the Mac or the Alt key on the PC, when I click, hold, and drag, I can change one antenna without changing the other. So Option click on the Mac, Alt click on the PC, and I can change the direction of the curve by selecting one of the two handles. And now, since this is a symmetrical object, I kind of know where to put the points. So I think about here, click, hold, and drag. And I can even continue to drag down horizontal guides. Notice that when I did that, I deselected my path. How do I reselect the path? Because I want to start working with this. With my pen tool, if I simply click that point again, I can start drawing. So let me just undo that. My escape key will clear it. So if I've drawn a path and I decide I want to draw a shape now, all I need to do is to click that endpoint of the path with my pen tool to reactivate the point and to continue drawing. So come down here, click, hold, and drag out my antenna. And now I just have one single click here at the bottom. Notice when I position my cursor over that bottom point, that's not bad at all. So if I click to close the path, I go to my swatches panel and I'm going to add a fill. That's a pretty good heart. I need to make a couple little adjustments. If I switch to my white arrow, my direct selection tool, and I click on that path, I can drag that handle up into position and make any adjustments. Sometimes this is a little tricky. So I'm having some trouble getting this curve. Well, here's the other thing. If I just click on the curve with my tool, my direct selection tool, I can pull the curve out and it will change the direction of the handles accordingly. This handle needs to be adjusted. This is where patience comes in. As I click, hold, and drag and make these adjustments, I can edit my shape.